Hey guys, welcome back to Educator Fresh. This is the second video in a series of videos about receptor cells and organs. Today we want to talk about the classification of receptor cells, and we are going to classify them either by structure, by the type of energy they transduce, where they are found, or the nature of response they give. If we classify them by structure, we have three types of classifications. We have primary, we have secondary, and we have tertiary. Under primary, we have just one cell that acts as the receptor, but is also the sensory neuron. So these are single sensory neurons that have dendrons, which are sensitive to a single type of stimulus, like the Pacinian corpuscles and the mencinous corpuscles. These guys are very important in sensitivity to pressure, and it's very important to know how they are able to help us, like for example, determine balance, which is called proprioception. Okay, the determination of the position and movements of muscles, bones, joints, bodies by what we call proprioceptors. So in this case, the corpuscles, that's what gives me a hard time, the Pacinian corpuscles, what they do is they detect deep pressure changes, and they are found in many areas of the body, like the skin, the mesenteries, around the guts, and their role there is simply to determine changes in pressure. They detect, not determine, change. They detect changes in pressure, and they also provide the impulse. They transduce pressure into an impulse. Like we said, all receptor cells have the ability to change information from electrical, light, mechanical, whatever type of stimuli it is in, and to change it into another type of impulse. The Pacinian corpuscles, in particular, transform pressure into an impulse. So they provide the CNS with information on the limbs and different portions of the body. So those are examples of primary receptors, like the Pacinian corpuscles and the mencinous corpuscle. I'll add a picture here, and then later we are going to be talking about how they actually work. The structure, the secondary receptors have two cells. These are epithelial cells that are adapted to detect a particular stimuli, like the olfactory cells in your nose. They are able to test, like to record, to pick up the chemical stimuli that come in, like when someone farts, like when you smell nice food, when you walk when you walk alongside a sewage pipe, they pick up the chemicals that come from that sewage pipe, and then they are attached to actually a sensory neuron. So these are epithelial cells that are adapted to detect a particular stimuli, and they communicate with the receptor neuron via synapse. We have a picture here. So this is our test receptor, and you can see here it is attached, it synapses with a sensory neuron. How do you know a sensory neuron? It has a cell body that comes off like this. So this is a chemoreceptor, in particular a test cell that is capable of transducing information from chemical into an impulse, and then it transmits that impulse via synapse to the sensory cells. So we have the olfactory cells and the taste buds. That's the secondary. So the first one, the primary were guys that actually just have a single type of stimuli. For them, they are just a sensory neuron that picks up changes, for example, in pressure, and then they send those changes via their axon. So their dendron is the one that is modified into a receptor. The sensory neurons have cells that are receptors, and they are epithelial cells, like the tongue, the taste buds on the tongue, and the cells in the nose. And then those cells synapse with sensory neurons. Then the tertiary are a bit more complicated. So these are complex receptors. They consist of very many receptor cells, and they are sensory neurons and supportive tissue. So for example, in the eye, we have the lens, we have the rods, and we have the cones. Okay, and then we have other receptors. We have nerves that are responsible for detecting nutrients. We have those that are responsible for detecting light changes so that the lens can be pulled in. We have those that are responsible for controlling the iris, and so on and so forth. So these guys consist of very many receptors, and they consist of sensory neurons and other supportive tissue around the organ itself. So the tertiary structures are the ones that we are going to be calling sense organs. So those are three categories. We have the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary. If we are to classify neurons according to their structure, if we classify them based on the stimulus they transduce, we are going to have about 4 of them. We have photoreceptors, which transduce light into an impulse. In other words, their stimulus is electromagnetic. We have chemoreceptors. It is in the word itself. These ones, the stimulus is a chemical, and they transduce a chemical into an impulse. So we have the olfactory, and we have the taste buds. They are responsible for smell, for taste. We have some in blood, like the hypothalamus, detecting the pH changes in blood, and so on and so forth. Then we have the mechanoreceptors, like the ear and the skin, which are responsible for detecting sound changes, touch, pressure, and gravity. So every time you orient yourself in a particular direction, there are receptors in the ear that are responsible for detecting your current orientation. And those type of receptors, they transduce changes in touch, gravity, pressure, and they transduce it into an electrical impulse. Then we have the thermoreceptors, which are responsible for detecting changes in temperature. And these ones are found mostly in the skin. Now, if we talk about position as a classification, we have what we call interoreceptors, and then we have exteroreceptors. Interoreceptors are internally derived. They are found inside the body, like the carotid and the aortic bodies, okay, found just in the neck, and they are responsible for detecting pressure changes, pH changes. We have the hypothalamus, detect changes in the pressure, changes in the pH of blood. And then external receptors, they respond to externally derived stimuli, like the taste buds, the ear, the olfactory lobes. We have the nose, we have the ears, the eyes, we have the pressure receptors in the skin. They detect stimuli that is from without. Now, earlier we talked about proprioceptors, and then these guys detect position, particularly the mensainous corpuscles and Pacinian corpuscles. For them, they respond to stimuli that is concerned with muscle and skeletal positions. So if you begin walking and running, what keeps you oriented and not falling are the proprioceptors. Some of them are found in muscles, tendons, and they are found in joints. A good example, they are responsible for detecting information that is coming from muscles, tendons, and joints. In the more complex ones, we have the ear's vestibular apparatus. We shall talk about it when we are talking about the ear as a sense organ. But their purpose is to detect your current position. If, for example, if you're watching this video while you're leaning, they tell you you're leaning. That's how you know you're leaning. If you're watching this video when you're standing, they communicate to you that you're actually standing. Another way that an example of the Pacinian corpuscle is this one. This is how it looks like. So it detects deep pressure, as we have already said, in the body, and you can see here, like we said, it is a primary receptor. So that dendron is modified into what? A receptor. So we have a capsule, then we have a nerve ending here, and then we have an axon. We have a blood capillary, then we have connective tissue. Now, every time pressure is applied on this connective tissue, the other thing that we talked about, depolarization happens, and then an impulse or an action potential is going to be propagated if the generator potential exceeds the threshold. Another way we can classify receptors is by nature of the response. In the previous video, I talked about tonic receptors and phasic receptors. So we said the tonic receptors continue to fire as long as the stimulus is maintained. So these guys here respond slowly. The phasic receptors respond to stimulus changes, but they do not respond to sustained stimulus. So phasic receptors are they are fast adapting. For them, they respond to a stimulus and that's it. If it continues firing, they first rest, then they can respond to it after some time. But the tonic receptors, for them, they can take some time when they're still responding to the receptor. So I have a few questions here that I would like people to go through and see if they can answer and do some research and then we shall put the answers, I think, in the first video. In the next video, the answers will be the first thing in the next video. So the questions are describe the sequences, the sequence of events by which a Pacinian corpuscle enables determination of the position of limbs, and explain how a Pacinian corpuscle produces a generator potential in response to a specific stimulus. I remain Solomon. Thank you for watching Educator Fresh. Please like and subscribe, and have a good day.